Hello guys, and welcome to another episode of Everyday EDC. My name is Tyler, and today we are reviewing two knives, kind of the same thing. I'm reviewing them together because they're just so damn similar. We have the Steel Will Modus and the Steel Will Mini Modus. So, these are essentially the same knife. One's just larger and one's just smaller. Duh, right? These are both D2. They have FRN scales. And this FRN is like a cool grippy. It's almost like it almost looks like a rock textured pattern. It's like you would see on like a rock climbing wall or something of that nature. Both of them have it, and they're both pretty much twins of each other, right? Except for the red and blue black spacer, which I'm sure, you know, he could have done that or not done that. This is also the blacked out version. This is not. These are Jake's knives, and I'm reviewing these basically because he's a nice guy and chose to send some in. So when I first opened these things' actions were so good, and I'm like, how is the action so good on this? Like, it's just, oh my goodness. Well, they were a little loose, so we did tighten them up, and the action got slightly worse, but nothing crazy. But they are on phosphor bronze, so that explains a lot, right? They're not on bearings. We're used to the bearing feel, yada, yada, yada. Well, because they're not on bearings, you're not going to get the bearing flipper feel, but they're still pretty darn fidgety, right? After kind of finding the sweet spot, you know, they're not perfectly centered, and before I send them back to him, I'm going to try to find that sweet spot for him and see if I can get them to be perfectly centered before I send them back. Because the last thing I want to do is send them back something, you know, not as good as he had already sent it out to me, right? So I didn't check that when I first got them, so we're going to fix that. But anyways, these are FRN scales. The pivot is a T8. The body screws and the pocket clip screws are T6. Same thing on the Mini Modus. The pocket clip is not a deep carry pocket clip, but it is ambidextrous. On both, they are tip down or tip up carry. We have the blacked out version with black hardware, the non-blacked out version with not black hardware. These are really functional blade shapes, both of these. It's this just awesome standard sheep's foot style blade that in hand you have this thumb ramp right here, and you do have pretty darn good control. Both with this finger ramp right here, and you don't get a full finger purchase. My little pinky wants to fall off here, but that's still a really good ergonomics for your three fingers. Now, if you could choke up here, which if this was my like forever knife, I'd take my Dremel and probably carve just a little bit more out of this blade so that I can get a full finger choil grab on there. But instead, it's just a sharpening choil, not a big deal. The flipper tabs are rather large on the large one, and on the small one, not a big deal, right? I'm not sure when these came out. I don't think these came out this year. They're a little bit older, so it's okay, right? And I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain these did not come out recently. Let's go over some specifications, and then we will get into some size comparisons. Overall length on the Mini Modus is about 6 3/4 inches. Actually, under 6 3/4. You're looking at almost about just over 6.5, which is pretty impressive. For how much blade length you're getting about 2 3/4 total blade from tip to the top of the scale, and you're getting about just the same amount of sharpened length because the top of the scale stops right at where that goes right there. So that's pretty cool. The larger one is coming in at about 7 3/4 plus or minus, kind of the same, 7.5 plus 1/10. The blade length on this is coming in at about 3 1/4. Same thing with the sharpened edge, about 3 1/4. Pretty darn good. That's the one thing I didn't check. So you're getting about 3 1/4 here. What's the overall length on this guy? It's about 4.5. So it's not, you know, blade to handle ratio, not great, but it's not bad. So let's get into the weight. The weight of the larger one coming in at a 3.3. And the weight of the smaller the Mini Modus coming in at a 2.87. So about half an ounce difference. If that matters to you, then that's, you go for the Mini. If that doesn't matter to you, go for the large, in my opinion. But let's see here. All right. Let's check the blade stock on the Mini. The blade stock's coming in at 120 thousandths, pretty good. The behind the edge thickness, right at about 20 thousandths. Let's check up here, see if there's... Yeah, about 20 thousandths behind that edge. Now, just for the sake of kind of keeping it uniform, this one looks thicker. Actually, I lied. This is 120 thousandths as well for the larger Modus, or the regular size Modus, I should say. So, interestingly enough, this is a couple thousandths thinner. Let's double check. Make sure I did that. Yeah. So the cool part is the larger Modus behind the edge is actually thinner than the Mini Modus. Now that kind of makes sense because you have a lot fatter of a blade profile. Let's see here. At the largest part of it, 1.14, and this is 1.09. So you're missing about, what is that? What the fuck would that be? About 5 thousandths. Or 500ths rather. So it gives it a little bit more distance to come on down and thin up. So that's probably why that's showing up a little bit thinner. Let's check the overall thickness of this guy. 0.47. That's pretty darn good because most knives are coming in at 0.5. So it's coming in at a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner. And this is blowing my mind. The smaller one is turning out to be larger. I'm glad I did these two together. The smaller one's turning out to be larger in most positions. Yeah, that's insane. The larger ones got it by just a little bit every step of the way. Let's check the overall height. It's not going to get it here. 1.36 inches. Now the overall height of this is coming in at, trying to get it right here, 1.25. Now we kind of expected that, right? It's a much smaller knife, so the overall height at least better be smaller. Something better be smaller. Now let's give you a couple size comparisons. All right, let's get into some size comparisons. Let's start off with your Rat Model 1 and your Rat Model 2. As you can see here, the small Modus, or the Mini Modus rather, is smaller than the Rat Model 2, so it's a fairly small knife. While the large Modus is slightly smaller than the Rat Model 1, but still much larger than the Rat Model 2. The Civivi Dogma and the Civivi Odium. The Mini Modus is barely got the Odium in size, which is pretty darn surprising. If you look at it right there, just barely. While the Dogma has got a slight little bit longer than the larger Modus. Here is your large feldspar, which is obviously much larger than the Mini, but slightly larger than the regular. And the Mini feldspar, as expected, slightly larger than the Mini Modus. Here is your PM2 and your PM3. PM3 compliments of Jake. I am going to use that for a review knife for a little bit so we can kind of see the typical lineup, right? So your PM3 is coming in at much larger than the Mini Modus lengthwise. Blade lengthwise, the Mini Modus actually has it by a slight bit, which is hard to see because of the black on black. But then the length on the PM3 is obviously much smaller than the large Modus or the regular size Modus. And the PM2 obviously dwarfs the Mini, or the regular. So I'm kind of getting them. It's kind of hard to go back and forth. But point being is these knives are at an interesting size reference because as you can see, your standard sizes like your feldspars, your rats, your PMs, you know, they're like slightly smaller than one, slightly larger than the other, and they just fall into this relatively, I'm not going to call it unique, but they're a slightly different than average length. So what are my overall thoughts on these guys? So first and foremost, I like the larger Modus much better than the Mini. Not for any other reason, probably than I just like a larger knife, but I also like to get a full purchase. Stealing that from somebody else. I like to get my whole hands around the knife. And you can do that with the regular size Modus. The Mini, no matter how I do it, I'm pretty much missing my pinky. Like, if I just got 3 fingers on there, let's see here. Like I'm going to cut something. You would think that you have room there, and I guess I can kind of get on there, but I'm hanging off. Not a big deal. Ergonomic-wise, if I had to rank these out of 10, I'd probably give the large Modus, or the regular size Modus rather, I'd probably give that about a 7. It's not great, maybe a 6.5. It's not great, but it's not bad. I mean, it's pretty good. It does kind of feel slippery, like this texturing, I don't know how well it would hold on. My hands are kind of sweaty, I guess. And then the small one, probably give that about a 5.5 or a 6. But if you're ranking it on smaller knives, you know, maybe it's closer to a 6.5 or 7 if you're not comparing it to a knife that you can get all your fingers on. I don't have any problems with the D2 steel. I absolutely, totally, completely love the blade shape. That's where these things are true winners. This sheep's foot blade is just absolutely fantastic. That's probably the best point of this knife, is the fact that this sheep's foot blade is just awesome. And this thumb ramp in the back is pretty good. It's a good spot. So the fit and finish around here, I mean, it's really, you got some recessed liners, which is nice. And let's see, using the Olight 3T, also provided by Jake. Let's see if you can see it. On one side, there is some milling on the large. Can't really see in there. And on the small Modus, or the Mini, I keep calling it the small. It's a freaking Mini. It's hard to see, but they both have milling on either side. As I said, these are on phosphor bronze washers. So it's nice that they did this contouring around the side. Not contouring, really chamfering. This sharpening choil is a very nice sharpening choil. I wish they would have made it into a finger choil. I say that about every knife, though. But this is like just large enough to be like, why'd you make it so big? Focus. Why'd you make it so big? But at the same time, it's just small enough that you kind of want to put your finger in there, but you know a little bit better because that's going to get you. I'm not sure if I talked about this, but the hardware is T8, T6. I think I did. Pocket clips are not deep carry, but they are ambidextrous, which is nice. They're okay. There's nothing special. It seems like a typical steel wheel pocket clip from what I've been seeing. I think my Sedge even has something very, very similar to that. These back spacers kind of feel like aluminum. No, I don't think they are. Let's see. Nope. I'm going to guess that these are also FRN. This is a black stonewash finish, pretty nice, and then we got the satin finish. The edges are not knocked down, so if I really tried, it's not going to cut you. I'm putting pressure, but it does take a little bit of my nail off. Not a huge deal. On the end, it's a little bit sharper. Let's see if it's the same way on here. Same way up here, but because of this black stonewash finish that they got going on here, this isn't as sharp. So what are my overall thoughts on these knives? I believe they're coming anywhere in between, say, $45 and $55, depending on where you find them. And you can also find some upgraded models. It obviously was a popular model if they're willing to throw some M390 on it and do a specialized version, right? I think they're fantastic. These are awesome working knives. They have the phosphor bronze in them. Like, you lose the fidget factor. So the majority of your time that you're fidgeting, you don't have that anymore with these. So these are no longer a man toy. They're more of a work. They're a tool. And I see these as a tool with that blade shape with the phosphor bronze washers that are in there. Absolutely. Did I mention they have a lanyard hole? 2 lanyard holes. Double lanyard hole. So yeah, these are absolutely a fine purchase either size depending on what you're looking for. My recommendation is to go with the regular size Modus because you get your full hand around it if you were to pick up one of these. But the mini is not bad. I carried this first before I even touched the larger one, and I really did like it. As I said, the action on it's perfectly acceptable for the price range of $40 to $50, $55. You're getting FRN, but D2. You know, I kind of feel like I would have to look up when these came out, but I would be willing to bet you they came out probably at least in 2019, if not way before then, because it feels like at that price point, with everything they're competing with now, I'm not sure that these compete in that price point. Something like this, if you don't do the black stonewash finish with the FRN, and then probably the FRN backspacer, which again, I'm pretty sure that's FRN. Maybe not. It might be aluminum. But with the D2 and the FRN, I mean, I feel like the price point should be a little bit lower for today's knife world. That does not make these a bad knife. That does not make them back then a bad knife. It just, you're competing with, for 30 bucks, D2. Ball bearings, great action, right? And do I think that they compete? I think they can. But if I were, I don't know that I would recommend these over the CJRB lineup, over the Civivi lineup, just because of that fact. If you're a steel wheel fanboy or you just really like the shape of this blade, there's nothing wrong with these by any means. It's just that price point that throws me off based on what we're getting today for that same price. For example, we're getting this Ferrum Forge Odium. I believe this was like 50 bucks. Oh my goodness, right? D2, awesome fit and finish, bearings, plenty of opening methods. You know, nice G10 as opposed to FRN, you know, blah, 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 blah. Once again, if you love the shape of these knives and the way they look, you are not going to be disappointed, though. Not at all. This is the Steel Will Modus and Mini Modus. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Tyler. This is Everyday EDC. EDC. Stay sharp. Stay safe. Have a great freaking day.